after having had the experience that I experienced with Judo Launch and with the previous businesses and these investors, I was determined to turn that experience into just yet another notch in my belt, just like 22X was, just like my brand was, just like going to Silicon Valley was. I was determined to turn that experience into a positive one in retrospect by using it as learning and incorporating it into my being as not negative programming, which another word for that is trauma, PTSD, which would negatively impact my decision-making skills by triggering me in certain situations, but instead cognitively and consciously distilling the lessons that I could positively pull out of that for the future and positively impact my algorithm for decision-making internally. So I was doing this real scrappy in San Francisco. I snuck into events by pretending to be security. I would like go into the back door and the backstage, and these would be like $1,000 ticket events. And then like I would sneak in backstage, and then once I was in, I would just like blend in. Or I would ask people who were coming out if I could have their tag because they were leaving the event, and I would just pretend to be Daniel Wisniewski or whatever. So I started seeking out people. I'd met this guy who had been through it. I decided I wanted to get in. And then I actually reached out to Sean, who's the guy that I sat next to in Princeton. And I was talking to him about what I was doing and that I wanted to go into 500 startups. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I know the founder. I'll refer you." And he personally introduced me to the founder of the third biggest tech accelerator on earth. And so that was a pretty good chip in my favor. And then
Nice.
I also met a number of other alumni, and after becoming friends with them, I asked them to refer me and to refer Judolaunch into the program. And so I had that in my favor as well. And so by the time I came in for my interview, so I'd been shortlisted because of these personal referrals, like I was automatically shortlisted. By the time I came into the interview, everybody knew me and had heard about me from multiple other people. So I did my pitch. They also loved that we were already making revenue, because the crazy thing about Silicon Valley is most companies raise millions of dollars with no revenue. It's insane. It's a totally different world if you're used to bootstrap companies or e-commerce startups. So they loved that we actually had revenue. So we got into 500 startups. And that was like, I can say, like, based on this decision-making framework that I was talking about, of like gaining skills internally versus gaining external like markers of success, that was a great decision. And I'm so happy I did it, because it exposed me to a whole new universe of how business is conducted that follows totally different laws than the world that you and I are in e-commerce. There are different dynamics at play following different laws of that universe it's like a whole other dimension. And some of it sounds real screwy when you say it out loud. But so we got 150K from them. Then they take back, I think, 40K as what they call the program cost. So I think we netted I think they take back 35K. So we netted 115K, and that was my first money raised. And you go through the program, and it's kind of like Titan. It's like a mastermind with courses, and you get like access to mentors and one-on-ones, and they track your KPIs, and it's like Titan, but they pay you instead of you paying them. So, but they take equity, and they take 6%. So they got 6% of the company. I got 115K and a bunch of mentorship and a shoe in to Silicon Valley, and basically like kickstarted my
6% on whose evaluation?
They value every company at 2.5 million. They don't even look at the underlying fundamentals of the company at all. They just they set a rule a long time ago. It's crazy, right? This is what I'm saying. Like, so right then and there, boom, Judo Launch is worth $2.5 million. Because what is a company worth? Whatever someone's willing to pay for it.
Sure.
And someone just paid $150,000 for 6% of my company. And the crazy thing is, all of the companies in the batch, when they exit the batch 4 months later, they raise money at 2-3 times that valuation. And they do that by showing progress if they have no revenue in other ways. And they teach you, like, it blurs the line between white hat and black hat, actually, like what we learned there, the growth hacking stuff that we learned, and the way that we learned to talk to and pitch investors. It was like
what?
Whatever you have that looks bad, don't talk about it. If you are worried about your tech, don't talk about your tech. Talk about your team. If you're worried about your team, don't talk about your team. Talk about your tech. If you have great numbers, and you're not sure if they're going to continue because you just did crazy promotions, be as loud as you can about it now before they go away. It's like, teaching you to hide all of the ugly parts and just show everyone. And by everyone, I really mean investors, but also partners and big clients. Like, everyone wanted to serve Google or Microsoft to have a big client because that proves that you're legit. And yeah, so it's kind of funny. There are a lot of parallels because it was like blurring the line between doing business with integrity and like kind of being a little sneaky. And if you watch any of these pitch days from these accelerators, you'll see like every single company has a graph that looks like this. That's all that matters, that you have the
Hockey
graph.
stick graph.
It doesn't matter what the graph is of. It doesn't matter if the graph is like users. It doesn't matter if the graph is revenue. It doesn't matter if the graph is like data processed. You just need to have a graph that does this. That's all you fucking need. It has to look like this, whatever the graph is representing.
And for
and you'll
audio
see
listeners, the Chris is basically up and to the right. It's like a hockey stick graph,
but curved, not
Yeah.
linear.
Yeah.
Curved. It has to be curved. Can't be a straight line. No, we don't like straight lines. We like curves.
I mean, so I'm a big integrity person. I think my rule always is never lie, cheat, and still make money. Just an integrity rule, right? But
it hurts you down the line too. By the way, it's not just hurting them; it hurts yourself.
Oh, the bullshit that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, like what you're saying, like if you're lying, cheating, like if you're straight outright deceiving, like you're not just hurting someone else; you actually end up fucking yourself.
That's why, yes. So there's two reasons why I do it. One is I really think that you'll just do better. Like if you just have integrity, you just don't lie, cheat, and steal, and you're a good, honest person that does good, honest work and
It's
like provides
the long game.
value, you'll just do better. It's a selfish policy because you will do better.
No, it really is.
And the second reason why I do it, it's just easier. It's just easier not to lie because I'm like, I don't need to build this like giant wicked web of lies, right? But
there's a third reason
that
too,
being
dude.
said,
yeah, there's a third reason too, and this is a lesson that it took me a while to learn, and it was actually the crash that I'm about to describe after this that taught me this lesson. Is in life you have parents, you have siblings, you have girlfriends or boyfriends, husbands and wives, you have kids. There are people that are really important to you that you have in your life that are the relationships that you value the most and provide the most profoundly positive experiences in life that you will cherish more than anything else when you're on your deathbed. All these relationships. However, not a single one of them is with you every moment of every day from the time you're born to the time you die. There's one person who is. It's you. There's one person who's with you, watching you, by your side, seeing everything you do, observing and judging it every second of every day of your life from the moment you're born to the moment you die. And it's almost creepy when you think about it that way, but it's true. You're observing not only other people, you're observing yourself. You're observing your own thoughts. You're observing your own behavior. And your perception of how much you like you comes from your observations of your actions. So if you're a shitty person and you're doing shitty things, you just fucked your relationship with the most important person in your life, which is you. Now you have to stick around with this guy who doesn't even like you. And he's stuck with you. You're stuck with this dude who hates your guts because he knows you're an asshole for your whole life. You just fucked up your most important relationship, dude. I think that's the most important reason to just be a good person and to do business with integrity and live life with integrity is that. that you get to have a good relationship with a person that you actually like and that you actually respect.
I love that. I love that, Chris. You're sounds like you have some integrity issues with the next players in the story, though, right?
Yeah, and it gets into some straight up like CSI level drama that somebody should make a movie out of at some point. Because what happened next was I piggybacked off the success of 500 startups. While I was in the batch of 500 startups, I got together. That was actually during the 2017 crypto bubble. So at this point, it was also known as the ICO bubble. While we were in the batch, we were watching live day by day this bubble of ICOs, which stands for initial coin offering, which is a play on IPO, which is an initial public offering when a company goes public. An ICO is an initial coin offering, so a company releasing for the first time a new digital currency into the world and selling it. So instead of selling shares in a company, which is what you do in an IPO to the public, in an ICO you're selling tokens to the public that you're saying have some utility or value for some reason, either now or in the future. And at the time, it was such an intense bubble in 2017. There was more money going into ICOs than there was into startups with traditional like VC. It was insane. It's not like that
Yeah.
anymore. This was a very short period of time that it was just a craze, like for a couple months in 2017. And these happened to be the couple months that I was in 500 startups. So we're watching this happen. I'm with a bunch, like I said, 500 startups. It's got a lower admittance rate than Yale, Harvard, or Princeton. So I'm surrounded by brilliant founders, brilliant startup founders. I literally like the old Larry Page, like Google saying, "Never if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room." Bro, I was the dumbest person in the room, probably by far. Like these people were absolutely not just brilliant, but also like good people too, like brilliant at tech relationships. Like I was with really, really smart people in this batch, and there are 22 companies in the batch. And so we're watching this happen, and we're like, yo, we're like in one of the top tech accelerators in the world with like a globally recognized name. We're a bunch of companies who have been blessed by this name now and have accepted venture capital. And we're seeing more money going into ICOs than into VC in the startup world. Are we going to sit back and watch this happen? And at the time, we're not calling it a bubble because we don't know it's going to crash. We were just calling it a phenomenon. Like, for all we knew, maybe it was a permanent change. But we're like, are we going to stand by and like watch this happen even while being inside some sort of inner circle, like in the belly of the beast here? And so my friend Jake and I, Jake is the founder of Freight Roll, which is a tech company in the forwarding space. And so he and I start exploring seriously the option of doing our own ICO. And this also ends up being one of the most intense learning experiences of my life and of my business career. Because what we did, to make a long story short, is we gathered a bunch of founders in the batch, and we became the first ever batch of any accelerator to issue a token representing equity in all of our companies. So we actually did a public offering through an exemption in the securities law, the SEC securities law, called Reg D 506C, that allows you to do a like semi public offering that allows you to market it or talk about it. And there was also new laws that were passed at the time and new exemptions, one called Reg CF that allowed equity crowdfunding. Kickstarter, which is crowdfunding, but you don't get equity in the company. There are now equity crowdfunding platforms, though actually now they've been around for a couple of years, where
Yep.
it's like Kickstarter, but you get equity in the company. That was illegal up until just a
Mm-hmm.
couple of years ago when this new
Yep.
law passed, Reg CF, and there's also something called Reg A, and there's another one called Reg A Plus, it was just kind of like a mini IPO. They call it IPO Light. So we utilize some of these new laws and regulations, and we created one of the first ever token offerings that represented a real legal security. All these other tokens, they circumvented securities law. They didn't file any forms. They weren't doing any of the regulations. They acted as though they weren't securities, even though they were. Whereas we did one of the first ever, I think we were the fourth, now there's been thousands, security token offerings. And we gathered all of the founders together. Everybody like committed equity in their company, and we released a token to the public that represented equity in all of the companies. Not every single one participated, but most of them did. So it was called 22X. The website is 22xfund.com. If anybody wants to check it out, you'll see my face like as soon as you go to the website. And we actually did a token offering, and we raised over $4 million at first, but that number actually went down because while we were raising, the bubble burst, and investors, the Bitcoin price plummeted. Investors couldn't pay the commitments that they made, or they had like their margins called because people were buying on margin like crazy. So we ended up, I think, netting somewhere in the 2 million for these companies. So every company got some money to grow, but we ended up having this amazing experience of being part of like this ICO revolution, and it was an insane adventure, bro. I like parts of it had me. There was one time I found myself at this billionaire's house named Brock Pierce, who was in the Mighty Ducks movie. He was a child star that became a Bitcoin billionaire because he bought in at Bitcoin when it was like $1, and partying with him with like crazy Russian models lying around the house and like all kinds of eccentric billionaire stuff happening, and at the front table at the best club in LA because I was raising money from like these eccentric crypto millionaires or billionaires. And that was an insane experience. And yet again, this underlying philosophy of following my own curiosity and just following my own interest, just like when I decided back in college to change from engineering to physics, paid off yet again, because even though it wasn't as successful as we wanted it to be, we did successfully raise the fund. And it was yet another like thing under my belt that, wow, I've done this. I've actually issued my own ICO. And if crypto becomes like part of the fabric of society in the future, I've already got like some crazy badass experience. We were in Entrepreneur Magazine. We were in Chip In. We were in BuzzFeed. Like it was like a sensation. Like we were covered by dozens of publications all around the world. We had over 3,000 investors commit capital. Like 3/4 of them were from outside the U.S. It was crazy experience. So yeah, so that happened. That wrapped up when we finished raising that fund. And then I immediately got accepted into another tech accelerator, which happened to be Shawns. So Sean, the guy from Princeton that was stayed up late with me in the office every night, he has a whole network of tech accelerators, and they pour hundreds of millions of dollars into startups every year. Now they fly more under the radar, even though they do more deals than almost any other VC in the world, including the big ones like Benchmark Capital and Andreessen Horowitz. Their name isn't quite as known, but they do more deal flow than the top guys. Because I think because of the nature of their founder, even like they're just not flashy. They like to just get shit done. So talking to his colleagues, we decided to go through their accelerator as well. And this is a little bit faux pas. So it's sort of frowned upon for a startup to go from accelerator to accelerator. It kind of means like, oh, like, did you not make it? Like, you couldn't raise your Series A? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, it's like being a super senior, like in college. Like, oh, you're still like, you're going to yet another accelerator. Like, what, do you need to be babied? So it's kind of frowned upon, but I wanted to do it, one, because I had a huge amount of respect for Sean. Two, because I didn't feel like I had gotten all of the learnings from that sphere that I could have gotten while I was at 500. I didn't feel like I was done with that chapter yet. And three is because it was in China, which is kind of a cool experience to like go through, to be in a whole different culture and see what their startup world is like. And that led me to whole new learnings and understandings, like we were discussing earlier when we were talking about the difference in values between the West and the East.
Awesome, Chris. So you're the gem of Silicon Valley. You're doing the incubator thing, and like Judo Launch is it's a rising, the giant riches part happens. I know you teased us before with what happens next. So tell us what happens next in the Judo Launch story.
Yeah, so this is where I get smacked down, and the
This is the
universe teaches
Icarus
me a
moment.
lesson. This is the Icarus moment. This is where I flew too close to the sun. So I gotten extremely aggressive at this point. Like I was reinvesting into myself in so many different ways, so hard, investing all this capital for growth, like still running really lean personally, just always like combining successes into more successes. So after we go through the second accelerator in Shanghai, I come to New York City to raise a proper round of funding for judo. And as part of that, we engaged with an investor that didn't align with my values, or my vision for the company, and I knew it going into it. So because of how aggressive I wanted to be, how fast I wanted to grow the company, like at this point, we were at like 45 full-time employees and like a
Oh
number of
wow.
contractors. Yeah, like I was aggressively growing this, and had like grandiose visions for like what it would turn into, like, and serve all of e-commerce and be like part of the backbone of the e-commerce um, industry. And I in my like my blind like growth mindset, like growth at all cost mindset, I started to take on like deals and make decisions that were not healthy for the company or for me as a person, like in the long term, because I was so blindly like obsessed with growth. And I also felt invincible. Like there was a because of like having like these successes, like kind of building on one another and like one after another, I was like starting to feel like I couldn't lose. And I didn't have that thought. I wasn't thinking, like if someone asked me like, do you feel like you couldn't lose? I'd be like, no. But subconsciously I actually did believe that. And so I was making decisions that had a high degree of risk because I wasn't accurately assessing risk versus reward. And this led me to engage with an investor that did not align with my values, and they ended up staging a hostile takeover of the company. And
Yikes.
I didn't even know what that was up until this point. But and there are a lot of ways that this can be done, but essentially, it's when an investor wants to take control of a company. Control meaning like the direction of the company, the vision of the company, the major decisions of the company, the hiring and firing, like that. Um, and the way to do that is to take control of the board, because then legally you get to make the decisions in a company if you control the board. You can fire the
And it feels
CEO.
weird because you think like, well, I'm the founder. Of course, it's my company, but it's not
Yep,
really your company anymore. Because when you
not
sell
anymore.
equity, the other people are owners. Just like
Yeah,
it's like you have a partnership, and this is a 10% partner, and this is a 20%
yeah.
partner, and depending on how the bylaws are written,
Hmm.
generally majority rules, depending on some
Yeah.
factors, whatever. But yeah,
But
so it's
dude,
very.
you could write your own rules too. That's what people don't realize. Like Mark Zuckerberg wrote in a clause that gave each of his shares 10 votes, and everyone else's shares had 1 vote. He just made that up. You can make up your own freaking rules. And so every deal is actually different. And our deals with this particular investor had all kinds of tangly webs. There was all kinds of terms that we could get caught up in. And I am not good at legal shit. I was not reviewing these contracts well enough. And like I said, I was trying to go too fast. And we ended up in a place where we had equity, debt, partnership agreements, like all kinds of agreements with these investors, and they had power over me and over us. And they decided that they didn't agree with the direction that I was taking the company. They wanted to focus more on services and less on software, and more on like basically like growing revenue really fast than growing a platform. And I was the complete opposite. And so they staged a hostile takeover, opened up 2 lawsuits, basically said, we'll let you go. We'll let you continue to be in this company and continue to be the CEO if you're our dancing monkey. You go to the conferences we want you to go to. You hire the people we want you to hire. You make the decisions we want you to make. We have 3 board seats. You get 1, and we'll pay you a nice salary, and you get to stay in the company, and we won't
Oh
ruin your
wow.
life. And if you don't, then we'll make your life a living hell. And so, me being stubborn, bullheaded, believing in myself, like to the max, I gave them two big middle fingers and said, okay, let's fucking go. And so we got into lawsuit territory. And this is where I realized that these guys knew what the fuck they were doing. They had done this dozens of times before, and they were legal ninjas. They had taken over other companies the exact same way. They had over a dozen companies in their family of companies. It was a wealthy family in New York. It wasn't like a professional VC. This was just like a, family, wealthy family.
Oh
And
wow.
so they took apart Judo Launch piece by piece in front of my eyes while draining every cent I had and more.
Wow.
And I I cannibalized the assets of my brand to pay for the battle, just pulled all the money and even debt that I could leverage from my brand, my personal brand out, my seven-figure brand, just to fund this battle and to keep Judo Launch alive and keep paying payroll for like nearly 50 employees. While they start building their own team, they started taking my people by offering them double the salary that they were earning. They started having calls with my top clients that they had access to because of the partnership agreements that we had, and taking and stealing them over as well, using some of our back end vendors to offer the same type of service that we were servicing. And they basically just started piece by piece. Hey, bro, we're going to take your company. Watch us do it right in front of your face. And that's what happened.
Damn.
Judo Launch basically got picked apart piece by piece. All of my previous investors got fucked because of this. And so what I ended up doing was, so I was in a legal battle and I ran out of funds at a certain point and then went way into debt, about $250,000 into debt, to continue fighting this. Moved into my dad's house, couldn't even pay rent anywhere, and was basically like, living like on the bare minimum. Yeah, and fought this battle all the way down. And this is where like my belief in myself kind of like did me dirty, because I really thought that I wasn't going to lose. Like I really thought like, yeah, like they have the legal knowledge. Yeah, they've done this before. Like this is their game, but I'm going to make it out of this, and Judo Launch is going to make it out of this, and we're going to like be better than we ever were before. And that's what caused me to just basically cannibalize everything else in my life in order to continue fighting this battle. And dude, I lost hard because I did have to shut down Judo Launch. Luckily, they actually were executing like criminal activities inside the company, and they had near the end, because of their spitefulness, they had started like funneling actual funds out of the company through a security flaw in the software that we use to allow employees to make small purchases and expenses.
Whoa.
So there, I actually got the district attorney of Manhattan involved, and they opened up a criminal investigation. And so this is what I'm talking. It's CSI level stuff. So the district attorney of Manhattan opens up a criminal investigation against one individual in this group, not the whole group, and I lose everything and more. Like I had less net worth and less money than a homeless person on the street, because they have $0. I had negative 250,000.
Wow.
Yeah, and bro, when I tell you it was a smackdown, it was not just the businesses I lost; it was my sense of self and my sense of identity,
Yeah, I
and
believe it.
the value that I assigned to myself, because I had started to self-identify as this rising star, successful entrepreneur, young, successful, like, on his way up. And now I'm, worth infinitely less than a homeless person, like, and had nothing, less than nothing. So this is where this is the ashes part of the story. Okay, that was me hitting rock bottom. I actually have a video on my phone of me recording myself discussing what I just discussed, my situation, so that I had record of like how bad it had actually gotten, because it was like so unbelievable to me, and I wanted to be able to look back on that like in the future when I do get out of it, and did get out of it. But when you're that deep, your subconscious like feels like this is forever. Like
Wow.
even though you might logically be like, yeah, like there's a long time that I have, and businessmen peak in their 60s, yada, yada, yada. Some part of you feels like, well, that's it, Chris. You just blew your shot, bro. Go find a desk job. But I I knew that I still yet had the conviction that I was still an entrepreneur at heart. I was in this for the long game, and I would eventually be able to look at this as a learning experience. I wrapped up the lawsuits. Nothing happened with that. They got scared off by the criminal investigation, and we signed resolutions to just not sue each other anymore in the multiple different lawsuits that we had going. So I put a bow on that. I started a new company called Sophie Society, which is my primary focus right now to this day. And this is 2019 we're talking about. So started Sophie Society. And because I didn't have any of the IP and I lost everything, like it would have been illegal for me to take any of the software or IP or assets or customers or lists or anything from Judolaunch because it belonged to that entity. So me shutting it down, even though I still have the accounts, I can't use them because it's illegal. It would be, stealing basically, even though it's my own fucking company. I couldn't use any of the successes that I got. And we had tens of thousands of customers in our list, like all kinds of contracts. And obviously we had this software. We had a great PPC software built that had that was out in beta, that had amazing customer experiences, and people were begging us to keep it online because they were using it actively in their accounts. And I was like, sorry guys, we got to shut it down. So I started with what I could start with, which was people. I took some of my most loyal people. I started Sophie Society and started it like right from the get-go in the red, because I brought 10 of my people over from judo. Like I said, already $250,000 into, well, no, $250,000 was a peak. So I was like probably about $150,000 in the hole at this point. And I was just like, fuck it, let's go for it. I brought my people over so I wouldn't have to start from ground zero. So my best people I brought over. So I had about 10 people to begin with. We were running in the red every single month for the first like 4 to 5 months. And then because of just hardcore perseverance, like I was working insane hours every day and also still had a reputation in the space. And I had already built up kind of like, a name, and I was speaking at conferences and stuff like that. And people knew my story. I was lucky enough to get a lot of business really early on just because people knew that I could produce results from Judo Launch and, from hearing about my story and my own successes in my own brand. And so Sophie started out with conversion and traffic for Amazon brands. So it's conversion content, photo, video, EBC, design, copy that leads to conversion. And I brought the science mindset into the company where every single listing we do, we measure the conversion rate and the traffic beforehand and afterwards, so that we know actually what's the conversion difference on every piece of content that we implement. And then we come up with new hypotheses on types of content that will work better, either in general or for specific categories, and we measure the difference. So I brought the scientific framework of creating hypotheses, measuring, testing, tracking data into this company, and I think that really had some kind of natural attraction to people in the industry, and we just started growing, and we actually started growing really, really quickly during Corona virus specifically, because there was just, I mean, I think everybody in this industry grew. There was just an explosion. And so we went from like 10% month over month growth to like 40% month over month growth to now we're like probably back to around 10 to 15% month over month growth, which I feel is healthy. Like at
Yeah,
Judo
man,
Launch,
that's
I wanted to like
awesome.
double every month or do like 30% month over month growth. Here, like I've gotten beaten down enough to know that my own personal health and the company's health like matters, and that I want to grow at a healthy rate and not too much. So we actually turn down business. Like we're at a point now where we put people on a waiting list if they're not appropriate for us to do business with like immediately, or they're not part of one of our partners like Titan or ASM or Private Label Masters. We'll we actually turn them down because we don't want to grow too fast. Because I learned that lesson in Judo Launch, what happens when you get too obsessed with insane hyper growth. So yeah, I mean, and now that brings us basically to the present day. We have 20 full-timers, including myself. I'm working with really smart people in the company that are smarter than me and better than me. We're doing a full. We were talking about this before we started recording. A full this is going to be like the biggest retreat I've ever hosted personally, where we're going to plan out the entire year of 2022 all together. I just came back from Serbia a couple weeks ago, where I'd met with the growth team and the operations team to like mind share and mastermind about like the future of the company. And yeah, I'm absolutely loving my experience of this, not feeling a crazy amount of pressure to grow insanely fast, having been humbled by the experience of being smacked down. I also kind of like released some of the pressure that I was putting on myself, started giving myself a little bit of just love and self-care and compassion and a little bit of a break. And I went from near the end of Judo Launch, I had my assistant do an analysis on my calendar, and I was in an average of 37 and a half hours of meetings each week. So 37 and a half hours spent in meetings each week. I had dozens and dozens and dozens of meetings each week. So I cut that down. I started like cutting out time for me to like live my actual life and not work 16 hours a day every single day. Still have those days for sure. Started cutting out time to like be healthy. And
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Well, congratulations on the success. Yeah, congratulations on the success. And people want to reach out and see if they are a good fit with Sophie Society. How can they do that?
They can actually email me, chris@sophiesociety.com. Yeah, that's fine. We could put the spelling in the show notes so I don't have to spell it out here.
Awesome.
Yeah, and by the way, the reason that I called it Sophie, because people ask this a lot, is because like after having had the experience that I experienced with Judo Launch and with the previous businesses and these investors, I was determined to turn that experience into just yet another notch in my belt, just like 22X was, just like my brand was, just like going to Silicon Valley was. I was determined to turn that experience into a positive one in retrospect by using it as learning and incorporating it into my being as not negative programming, which another word for that is trauma, PTSD, which would negatively impact my decision-making skills by triggering me in certain situations, but instead cognitively and consciously distilling the lessons that I could positively pull out of that for the future and positively impact my algorithm for decision-making internally. And so Sophie is the Greek root for wisdom. It's in the word philosophy. So I wanted to encode into this company that I will not continue making the same mistakes I've made in the past, that I will view my hardest experiences in life as positive ones in retrospect, and I will encode that wisdom into everything that I do in the future. And that's why I call the company Sophie Society.
I love that. I love that. Philosophy.
Philosophy. Right? Yeah, exactly.
Nice. I love that, man. Yeah. That's fantastic. So, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. You started out in the university physics, and then went into solar, then went into ecom, and built up Judo Launch, went to Silicon Valley, was the star and the gem of Silicon Valley for a minute, flew a bit too close to the sun, had a bad experience with an investor, did a hostile takeover, fell down from the ashes. Chris and Sophie Society comes out as a new phoenix from the ashes into this big, beautiful, gorgeous phoenix bird. So, Chris, thanks so much for sharing your story with us. That was really nice.
For sure, bro. Good chatting, good hanging with you.
Yeah, man. It's always a good time, and I'm glad you came on to our call.
Can we just do an ASMR episode, please? We could just do like a disclaimer in the beginning. Hey guys, listen, we're not going to do any Amazon tips this time. It's just going to be all ASMR the whole time.
BBC launching conversations. Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Chris. Thanks so much for being on. Good, and yeah, man. Let's bring you on like maybe like a year from now. We'll hear the yet again meteoric or the explosion of Sophie Society and how awesome it's doing yet again a year from now.
Hell yeah, dude. Let's do it. Can't wait.
Awesome. Thanks, bud. I hope you enjoyed that content, and I'm going to have a small ask for you. If you have not left us a review, iTunes is where you go to leave your feedback for us. Just like a product review on Amazon, you have to get those reviews to get that rank, to get people to see your stuff. It's the same way on iTunes. These reviews really help us spread the message. So if you found any value at all, please go to iTunes right now, open your phone, go to iTunes, pop it in, give us a review. I'm going to read one of my favorite ones here. Daniel PK said, excellent content that you can't find anywhere else. Andrew has incredible guests on that have a diverse range of expertise. Some of the content you may be able to find on some of our podcasts. However, a good chunk of the content, whether it's guests or topics or expertise, you can only find on this podcast. You won't find anywhere else. Highly recommend for folks already involved in e-commerce. So Daniel PK, I appreciate it. Thank you for letting people know that this podcast brought value to you. And if this podcast brought value to you, the audience, the listener right now, you, yes, you, I'm talking to you, please go to iTunes and leave us a review.